John Wayne Gacy was untouchable, a predator in a smile who vanished boys into the darkness while police searched in circles. But what if he'd faced somebody just as lethal as him? Two killers, one code, only one walks away. Let's dive into what would really happen if Gacy ever found himself going head-to-head with Dexter Morgan. John Wayne Gacy looked like the last person you'd suspect of being one of the most horrifying killers in American history. Gacy grew up in a strict, often abusive household in 1940s Chicago. His father was an alcoholic who berated and beat him regularly. He would often call his son effeminate nicknames and accuse him of being a closeted homosexual. That early humiliation set the stage for decades and decades of hidden rage and manipulation. Despite his troubled childhood, Gacy managed to carve out an image of success. By the time he reached young adulthood, he was a respected member of the community. He became a small business owner, a political volunteer, and even someone who entertained children, performing as Pogo the Clown. To his loved ones and his neighbors, Gacy seemed friendly and dependable, if a bit eccentric. The point is, nobody imagined that behind the painted-on clown makeup was a child predator and killer. I'm sorry, you're telling me no one suspected the clown? Gacy's crimes started in the early 1970s, and by the end of the investigation, what police found would shock the world. Gacy primarily targeted teenage boys and very young men, often luring them with promises of jobs, money, or just a fun time. He would regularly offer drugs and alcohol to his intended victims to get them to go with him willingly, but once he got them inside of his home, his targets rarely made it out. Gacy would use a handful of tricks to get the boys in a defenseless position. He'd joke to them about experimenting sexually, put on adult videos, and force-feed them alcohol, no matter their age. And he even got some of them to handcuff themselves, claiming he was teaching them a trick how to escape handcuffs. Unfortunately, once they were restrained, Gacy had them right where he wanted them. He had no intention of letting them go, and sadly for many of his victims, their lives would end and their bodies would be hidden in the now infamous crawl space. Over time, the space would quite literally become a makeshift mass grave directly under Gacy's house. Eventually, police were able to connect the missing persons reports to Gacy's area, but it still took a lot of persistent detective work before they were able to link him directly. When authorities finally searched his property, they discovered several bodies buried under the house and more found in nearby rivers. In total, it is estimated that Gacy had murdered approximately 33 people, making him one of the deadliest serial killers in US history. What made Gacy especially disturbing wasn't just the sheer number of his victims, but his two-faced nature. He could charm local officials, host neighborhood barbecues, and volunteer for community events, all while carrying out horrific acts behind closed doors. Even after his arrest, he showed little remorse, often portraying himself as a victim of circumstance or false accusations. But in 1980, his trial would reveal the true extent of his crimes. While at work one day, a 15-year-old boy named Robert Piest spoke with Gacy about a potential new job with higher pay, was never seen again. It was his disappearance that would lead to Gacy finally being caught. Because Robert was last known to be meeting with John Wayne Gacy, which made him a prime suspect in the disappearance. The killer denied ever meeting Robert, but investigators found a receipt from Robert's jacket pocket in Gacy's house, confirming that Gacy was indeed lying. Eventually, he was arrested and forced to answer for his crimes. During the trial, prosecutors presented photographs of what was found in his crawlspace as evidence and pointed to inconsistencies in his story to police about meeting with Piest. All of the witness testimonies culminated to paint a picture of a manipulative, sadistic man who used his charisma to lure, dominate, and eventually murder all of his innocent victims. In the end, Gacy was sentenced to death and was executed by lethal injection in 1994. What is so harrowing about Gacy is that he represented the darkest side of human nature, how easily predators can infiltrate a community. He was a man who wore a mask of kindness and normalcy while preying for the vulnerable. Gacy lived this way to avoid detection and throw off suspicion, but it is exactly this despicable double life that would make him a prime target for someone like Dexter. If there's one thing Dexter can't stand, it's a predator who hides behind the facade of a family man to prey on the defenseless, especially when the victims include children. What separates Dexter from people like Gacy is not only his intelligence or precision, but the moral guidelines taught to him by his adoptive father, Harry. Harry realized pretty early on that Dexter had violent urges he couldn't suppress, but instead of letting him spiral into becoming another monster, Harry redirected his son's urges. He taught Dexter how to channel his darkness into something that served some sort of justice. The code was also meant to keep Dexter out of jail and off of death row, which, as Gacy's fate shows, is the likely end for someone who lived with an unyielding desire to kill others. Dexter may have been a killer, but his code taught him to never kill an innocent. We know he would only kill those who deserve it, targeting proven killers who had managed to escape justice. The code shaped every aspect of Dexter's life. He lived every day balancing the monster inside him with the moral compass his father gave. Unlike Gacy, who killed out of sadistic pleasure, Dexter saw his killings as a dark necessity. It gave him a way to rid the world of deadly predators and keep his own urges in control, ensuring he would never intentionally target an innocent person just to satiate his needs. Over time, he became disgusted with typical killers and their willingness to murder innocent people just because they felt like it. In his eyes, killing adults was horrible enough, but when it came to children, Dexter's line was absolute. Throughout the series, Dexter has an unwavering instinct to protect kids, most likely as a reflection of his own childhood trauma. When he was just 3 years old himself, Dexter watched his mother's brutal murder and dismemberment. He was left there surrounded by blood, alone with only his brother in a shipping container and dismembered body parts, and it shaped his entire psyche. It's understandable then that when Dexter sees children in danger, he sees himself in them. There was a hidden tenderness to Dexter. He was a man capable of monstrous violence, but was still always very gentle and patient when dealing with kids. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. From Aster and Cody, his stepchildren, to his biological son Harrison, and even kids he doesn't know, Dexter becomes fiercely protective when children are involved in a case. He's even willing to break or adjust his code to keep them safe. In the very first episode, Dexter's first target is a man named Mike Donovan, a predatory choir director and church leader who molested and killed young boys before burying their bodies. Dexter was absolutely enraged by Donovan's crimes. When Dexter screamed in the perp's face and demanded he open his eyes and look at what he'd done, it seemed personal. To Dex, those who harm children aren't just criminals, they're the lowest of the low. Dexter knew that by killing Donovan. He was saving the lives of countless boys who were bound to end up as future victims. Given many of Gacy's victims were young boys, some as young as 14, finding out about him would instantly trigger the part of Dexter that can't tolerate such evil. And Mike Donovan wasn't the only child killer Dexter would go out of his way to get rid of. He also killed Zoe Kruger, a corrupt cop who killed her own husband and young daughter. And more notably, Dexter took out a man named Nathan Martin after catching him creeping on Aster. Martin was a registered sex offender for past crimes against children, but he was released from prison and went right back to his disgusting ways. His final mistake would be targeting Dexter's kids. Even though he wasn't a killer, meaning it didn't fit the code in a technicality, Dexter knew that Nathan would continue harming kids if he was left alive. So he broke into his house one night and strangled him to death after he caught the predator taking pictures of Aster at the beach. Dexter hated what Nathan did so much that for the first time in his life, he adjusted Harry's code, making it his own, and included child predators as viable targets for his urges. So it's obvious that if he ever met John Wayne Gacy, Dexter wouldn't hesitate to do what he needed to do. He'd investigate and vet Gacy first, of course, to confirm the truth of Gacy's crimes, and once the evidence was solid, Gacy's fate would be sealed. Unlike Gacy, who hid behind charm and lies, Dexter uses his training and intelligence to fulfill a purpose. Once both Dexter and Gacy's profiles are outlined, the outcome of a showdown between the two is all too predictable. Everything about their methods, personalities, and just their overall mentalities indicated that this matchup would never be balanced. Gacy operated on arrogance and manipulation, could become erratic when cornered, while Dexter used precision, solid evidence, facts, and almost always maintained his composure. The hunt would be one-sided from the moment Dexter noticed Gacy's pattern. But how would he do that? Gacy was under the radar for so long, so how would Dexter edge out the police to get Gacy on his table? First, we need to keep in mind that Dexter's entire approach to finding potential targets begins with pattern recognition. He doesn't act on pure instinct alone, and he tries to keep his personal emotion out of his vetting process. Instead, Dexter relies on the facts uncovered through forensics. So for Dexter, the discovery of Gacy's pattern would begin with the news that a boy was missing, the fact that Gacy's victims were all last seen with him. Once Dexter uncovered the long series of missing persons cases in the area that all share unsettling similarities, he wouldn't stop until he got to the bottom of it all. Dexter would realize that each disappearance involved a young man, usually between the ages of 14 and 21, who had last been seen with a local contractor promising a good time or quick work with high pay. To ordinary investigators, these cases might have looked like isolated cases of runaways, but to someone like Dexter, whose entire career is built around connecting the dots and making sense out of chaos, the truth would be undeniable. The consistent victim profile, the proximity of each disappearance to one another, all in the same area of Illinois, and the consistent link to a single community member would stand out to Dexter immediately. Once he verified that John Wayne Gacy was connected to all known victims, the case would move from speculation to certainty for Dexter. In next to no time, Gacy would be the obvious suspect, and the real vetting could begin. Much like he has with Nathan Martin and with so many others, Dexter would easily break into Gacy's home to gather concrete evidence of his guilt. If the stench of decaying bodies didn't set off the alarm bells in Dexter's lizard brain, the items from the missing boys being around Gacy's home would. From the Tooth Fairy to Kurt Caldwell, Dexter had no problem tracking down the trophies of a killer, no matter how well they were hidden. Dexter has been able to find the keepsakes his targets kept to remember their kills. When going through Gacy's house, Dexter would undoubtedly run into one piece of evidence after another. Each item he found that was linked to one of the missing people would confirm to him that Gacy knew more than he was letting on and was almost certainly responsible for the disappearances. But going back to the smell, Dexter would recognize it immediately, and with enough time, he would be able to find where the bodies were stashed before Gacy returned home. Keep in mind that the ungodly smell in Gacy's home was the result of his foolishly keeping the bodies of his victims in the crawl space beneath the house. It was the disappearance of Robert Piest that led investigators to look into Gacy, but it was the foul odor that emanated from his vents that sealed his fate. Detectives knew that there had to be a dead body in the house the second they caught a single whiff of the putrid smell, but they had to go through the proper channels and obtain a search warrant before they could look any further. Dexter obviously wouldn't have that problem. He could find the trophies, investigate the smell, find the bodies, and be out of the house with no problem. Then the only matter would be studying Gacy's routine and determining the best time to strike. Gacy was twice divorced, and although he had children, they were never around. He lived by himself, which would make getting Gacy alone and strapped to a kill table no problem for Dexter. This would also make it an easy location for Dexter to set up the kill room. Because Gacy was always trying to impress people and didn't mind socializing, getting to Gacy would be like shooting fish in a barrel for Dex. Gacy was attracted to younger men, but if Dexter presented himself as a gay man looking for a good time, he could have enticed a drunken Gacy to invite him back to his place. Gacy was a lonely drunk with a ridiculously oversized ego. his arrogance would probably keep him from realizing or even considering that Dexter was a threat to him. If Dexter caught up with Gacy at one of the places around town he frequented, like a bar or a club, and started chatting him up, he'd likely be able to convince Gacy to hang out with him alone. The rest would be history. As soon as they were out of the sight of anyone else, Dexter could inject Gacy with M99 and handle his business. John Wayne Gacy was by no means a small guy, but that has never stopped Dexter before. He has taken on plenty of killers who outmatched his size and still came out on top. Gacy wasn't a fighter. He didn't threaten his victims with physical violence to get them to comply. He lied to them and tricked them into thinking they would get something of value by hanging out with them. He didn't subdue with brute force either. He got them drunk. He made sure many were handcuffed before the true horrors began. He was out of shape, overweight, and clearly lacked confidence in his ability to overpower his victims, despite the fact that he was older and larger than all of them. Dexter doesn't suffer from those limitations. He's closer to a trained athlete or a trained fighter. Dexter has years of experience taking down killers in a variety of ways. Even if he didn't want to try and take Gacy in hand-to-hand combat, he'd be open to trying it if necessary, and he'd probably fare pretty well because Gacy was a coward. If he wouldn't try fighting a 14-year-old boy, there's no way he'd try to physically attack Dexter, and his little handcuff trick wouldn't get him too far either. Remember that Dexter has already fought his way to freedom while handcuffed with a gunshot wound to the leg, while struggling for his life in a lake. Even with all of those disadvantages, he managed to incapacitate Sergeant Dokes, who is way stronger and physically menacing than John Wayne Gacy. That means that even if Gacy did manage to get Dexter in cuffs, he wouldn't be out of the woods by a long shot. And once the tranquilizer was administered, it would all be over for him. Whether Dexter convinced Gacy to invite him into his home or lied in wait for him to return and ambushed him, there is just no chance in hell that Gacy would have gotten the upper hand on someone as prepared and skilled as Dexter. Sure, Dexter only exists as a fictional embodiment of controlled vigilante justice, but John Wayne Gacy is a case study in uncontrolled depravity. When all factors are weighed, Dexter's advantage over Gacy is obvious. Dexter's intelligence and training combined with his motives and morality ensure that there is no real contest. Gacy's downfall was the result of arrogance and carelessness, but Dexter's continued survival is a testament to his efficiency and discipline. Gacy is sloppy and overly self-assured. You pair that with his impulsive nature and lack of any physical training, and you're looking at an easy victim for Dexter. He would have more wrath for a child predator like Gacy than most other targets, but it wouldn't distract him from the task at hand. If anything, it may even serve as motivation to get the job done as quickly and cleanly as possible. After Gacy was taken care of, the only thing Dexter left behind would be an empty house and a safer community. If they ever did cross paths, Gacy's legacy of horror would end before he could victimize any more young men and long before police could uncover it. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be the quick, efficient execution of a murderous madman. When the chaos of Gacy meets the calm control of Dexter Morgan, there is no question who would win. Do you think Dexter could take Gacy down? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this analysis, check out our in-depth breakdown of Dexter versus Jack the Ripper. Please take a moment to consider taking out all your frustrations and slashing the subscribe button for more Dexter videos. Thanks for watching.